Elon Musk, disguised as an ordinary man, enters an exclusive restaurant to see how people would treat him without knowing his identity. As most patrons dismiss him, one waitress, Sophia, surprises him with kindness. When Elon's true identity is revealed, the room is left in shock. Will this act of compassion change anything, or will society's judgments remain the same? The night holds a twist that challenges everything we think we know about kindness and appearances. Stay with us to see how this unexpected experiment unfolds, and don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories that challenge perceptions and reveal the truth about human nature. Elon Musk sat alone in his office, an unusual stillness enveloping him amidst the constant whirlwind of innovation and ambition that defined his life. For once, there were no urgent emails or groundbreaking meetings, just a quiet moment to reflect. It was during a recent conversation with a colleague about human behavior that the idea had taken root. What if people didn't know who I was? He had mused aloud. How would they treat me if I were just ordinary? The thought lingered, turning from a passing curiosity into an irresistible challenge. What if he shed the identity of a billionaire innovator and entered the world as someone unremarkable, even overlooked? Could the way people treated him reveal something deeper about humanity? Weeks passed, and the idea grew into a plan. On a gray Thursday afternoon, he finalized the details. His disguise needed to be simple, yet convincing, enough to erase any trace of the man who regularly graced magazine covers. He visited a thrift shop, selecting secondhand clothes that smelled faintly of mothballs and dust. A makeup team subtly altered his features, adding lines to his face and softening the sharp edges that made him so recognizable. A scruffy, unkempt wig completed the transformation. When he looked in the mirror, the reflection startled him. Gone was the polished tech mogul. In his place stood a man who might be mistaken for someone down on his luck. His tailored suits and shiny shoes had been replaced with scuffed sneakers and a jacket 2 sizes too large. The unfamiliarity was haunting. For the first time in years, Elon felt invisible. Stripped of the identity that defined him, he found himself grappling with a strange mixture of vulnerability and excitement. His destination was chosen with care: the Copper Elm, a prestigious restaurant in Santa Fe, New Mexico, known for its exclusivity and high-end clientele. It was the perfect testing ground, a place where appearances often dictated treatment. This isn't about proving a point, he reminded himself, it's about understanding. As he stepped out the door, his heart raced. The weight of what lay ahead pressed on him, though he couldn't quite place why. The drive to the restaurant was uneventful, the city bustling with its usual rhythm, yet every streetlight, every passing car seemed to sharpen his focus. He wondered what he would find, not just about others, but about himself. When he arrived at the Copper Elm, its grand double doors loomed before him, their polished surface reflecting the overcast sky. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then pushed them open. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with sophistication. Chandeliers bathed the room in a soft golden glow, and the hum of quiet conversation mixed with the clink of glassware. Elon's entrance caused only a minor ripple at first. Diners glanced briefly his way before resuming their meals, but the staff lingered, eyes darted toward him, their polite smiles faltering. Elon stepped onto the polished hardwood floor, his worn sneakers scuffing against its sheen. A hostess approached, her immaculate black uniform contrasting sharply with his disheveled appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice carefully measured but tight. "Yes," Elon replied softly. "I'd like a table for one." The hostess hesitated, her eyes flicking toward a manager near the bar. He was watching the exchange closely, his arms crossed. The hostess glanced at a row of empty tables before quickly saying, "We're fully booked tonight." Elon caught her glance and the hesitation in her voice, but chose not to argue. Instead, he stood there, letting the silence grow. The tension was palpable. From across the room, a young server noticed the scene. Sophia, barely into her 20s, had been working at the Copper Elm for just a few months. Saving for culinary school, she was used to the high-pressure environment, but something about the man intrigued her. His demeanor wasn't desperate or demanding, just calm, almost resigned. "I can seat him," Sophia called out, stepping forward before the hostess could dismiss him entirely. All eyes turned toward her, including the manager's. His frown deepened, but he didn't stop her. "Follow me," Sophia said, her voice steady but warm. Elon offered her a faint smile as she led him to a small table near the kitchen doors. It wasn't the best spot, but it was a seat, and for that he was grateful. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Sophia nodded and placed a menu in front of him. Take your time, she said before walking away. As Elon glanced around, he could feel the weight of the room's judgment. Whispers began to spread among the diners, subtle but sharp. Their glances ranged from mild curiosity to outright disdain. For the first time, Elon truly understood what it felt like to be dismissed based solely on appearance. Yet instead of discomfort, he felt something else, a keen sense of observation. Every whisper, every glance became data for the experiment he had set in motion. The stage was set, and the first act of Elon's experiment had begun. Elon Musk sat at the small table near the kitchen doors, his back to the polished expanse of the main dining area. The aroma of freshly prepared meals filled the air, but his focus was on the whispers that rippled through the restaurant. Who is he? A man muttered to his companion, barely concealing his disdain. Probably wandered in off the street. The woman replied, her tone cold. From his vantage point, Elon observed everything. The restaurant, with its chandeliers casting a warm glow over pristine tablecloths, was a study in contrasts. Elegance clashed with the unspoken tension his presence seemed to create. The staff wasn't immune to the discomfort either. Near the bar, two servers exchanged pointed glances. One leaned in and whispered, "What's he even doing here? He's gonna scare off the regulars." The other replied, chuckling quietly. Elon didn't react outwardly, though he noted every word. He hadn't expected warmth or welcome, but the blatant judgment caught him off guard. How easily people dismiss someone who didn't fit their expectations. Sophia, the young server who had offered him a table, returned with a notepad in hand. Her demeanor remained professional, but there was a warmth in her voice that the others lacked. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" she asked, her pen poised. Elon glanced at the menu, though he had no real appetite. "Just soup and bread," he said. Sophia hesitated, her brows furrowing slightly. "That's all?" He nodded. "That's all." She smiled faintly. "I'll be back soon." As Sophia disappeared into the kitchen, Elon leaned back in his chair, letting his eyes wander. The judgment from the diners was palpable. A man at a nearby table leaned toward his partner and whispered, "Do you think he's here to beg for money?" "Maybe," the woman replied, frowning. "They really should screen people at the door." Every word, every glance painted a vivid picture of how deeply appearances shaped perception. Elon felt no anger, just a quiet resolve. This was why he was here after all. When Sophia returned, she carried a tray with a steaming bowl of tomato bisque and a small basket of bread. She placed them in front of him with care, her movements unhurried despite the judgmental eyes watching her. "Enjoy your meal," she said with a genuine smile. "Thank you," Elon replied, his voice soft but sincere. Sophia moved gracefully through the room, tending to other tables. Elon noticed how her demeanor didn't waver. Even when faced with demanding patrons, she treated everyone with the same patience and respect, her kindness standing out in stark contrast to the whispers around her. At one point, an older woman sitting at a corner table beckoned Sophia over with a sharp wave of her hand. When Sophia approached, the woman gestured subtly toward Elon. "Why are you wasting your time on him?" she asked, her voice loud enough to carry. "People like that shouldn't even be allowed in here." Sophia's cheeks flushed, but she kept her composure. "I believe everyone deserves respect, ma'am," she replied firmly. The woman scoffed, waving her off. "Well, don't expect a tip from me." Sophia's expression didn't falter as she turned away, but Elon caught the way her shoulders tensed slightly. Despite the hostility, she continued working, her focus unwavering. Elon sipped his soup, the warmth of the meal contrasting with the coldness of the room. A server approached him, not Sophia, but a man in his late 20s with a stiff posture and a clipped tone. "Are you planning to order anything else?" the server asked, his words edged with impatience. "No, thank you," Elon replied evenly. The server offered a tight-lipped smile before walking away, muttering under his breath. Elon didn't catch every word, but waste of space reached his ears. At a nearby table, a young couple exchanged nervous glances. The woman whispered, "What if he asks us for money?" Her partner shrugged, his expression uneasy. Through it all, Elon remained composed. He wasn't surprised by the reactions, but seeing them unfold in real time felt different than reading about them in studies or hearing anecdotes. It wasn't just about him, it was about the assumptions people made, the walls they built between themselves and others based solely on surface-level judgments. When Sophia returned to clear his table, she paused for a moment. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Elon looked up, surprised by her question. "Yes," he said. "Thank you for your kindness." Her expression softened, and she gave a small nod before moving on. For the first time that evening, Elon felt a flicker of hope. Sophia's empathy, though rare, proved that some people look beyond appearances. As the evening wore on, the tension in the restaurant grew. Elon could feel the weight of the stares, the whispered conversations that stopped whenever he glanced in their direction. He wasn't just an outsider, he was a mirror, reflecting back the biases and judgments people rarely confronted. The meal was simple, yet it had left a profound impression, not on him, but on the room. The experiment had begun to take shape, and Elon knew the most revealing moments were still to come. Elon sat quietly, finishing the last of his soup. The room around him buzzed with the low hum of conversation, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of discomfort in the air. He could feel the eyes on him, each glance a tiny judgment. He observed the subtle shifts in body language, the way people subtly leaned away when they spoke of him. The glances exchanged between patrons who were too polite to say anything aloud. They all treated him as if he were invisible. Beneath them, Sophia moved between tables with the grace of someone who had mastered her craft, but her every step seemed heavier to Elon. The weight of the judgment in the room pressed against her as well, but she bore it without faltering. Her professionalism was admirable, but it was her empathy that stood out. She wasn't just doing her job, she was offering something more, something that set her apart from the others. Across the room, the manager was still watching him. Elon could feel the man's eyes lingering on him, perhaps wondering when he would leave or if he would cause a scene. But that wasn't part of the plan. This was about more than simply sitting through a meal. It was about understanding what people were willing to do when they thought no one was watching, what assumptions they would make about someone based solely on appearance. The final moments of the evening were approaching, and Elon knew it was time to take the experiment to the next level. He had seen enough. It was time for the reveal. He stood up slowly, drawing the attention of the entire room. The hush that fell over the copper elm was immediate and tangible, like a collective breath held in anticipation. Sophia, who had been walking past his table, froze mid-step, her eyes locking onto his. The other servers and staff members paused as well, sensing something significant was about to unfold. Elon reached up and with a steady hand, removed the wig. Gasps rippled through the room. The transformation was striking. For the first time that night, the familiar face that had graced magazine covers, news broadcasts, and countless headlines was visible to everyone. Elon Musk? Someone whispered, incredulous. He straightened and let the silence hang for a moment. He let the realization sink in. The man they had all treated with disdain was in fact one of the most well-known figures in the world. Yes, it's me, Elon said, his voice calm but carrying across the now silent room. And tonight, I didn't come as the billionaire entrepreneur you all know. I came here as someone you wouldn't give a second glance to. A wave of realization swept through the room. The diners who had once sneered at him, whispered about him, and judged him for his appearance now exchanged uncomfortable glances. I wanted to see how people would treat me, Elon continued. How you would treat someone who didn't fit your expectations, someone you thought had nothing to offer. The room remained eerily quiet. All eyes were on him. Some faces turned crimson with embarrassment, while others simply stared, still processing the revelation. But there was one person who stood out in the crowd, Sophia. Elon's gaze found hers. She was standing still, her tray still clutched in her hands, her expression a mix of surprise and confusion. You, Elon said, his voice softening, you treated me with respect, even when you didn't know who I was. In a room full of judgment, you saw a person, not a homeless man or a stranger, but a human being. Sophia's face flushed with surprise, and her eyes widened. I was just doing my job, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Elon replied, shaking his head. You went beyond that. You showed me kindness when it would have been easier to look the other way. You didn't know who I was, but you treated me with dignity. The murmurs in the room grew louder, some patrons clearly uncomfortable with the lesson unfolding before them. Elon wasn't just revealing his identity, he was revealing a mirror to their behavior, forcing them to confront how they had treated him based solely on his appearance. He turned back to the room, his voice gaining strength. To those of you who judged me tonight, let this be a lesson. Appearances can be deceiving. How you treat others speaks more about you than it ever will about them. The tension in the room was palpable. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. Elon reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to Sophia. She looked at him, still in shock, as she took the envelope from his hands. "This is for you," he said, his voice sincere. Sophia opened the envelope carefully, and inside she found a handwritten note along with a check. She read the note aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. "Sophia, thank you for your kindness. Use this to follow your dreams. Culinary school, your own restaurant, whatever you choose. The world needs more people like you." The check was for $50,000. Sophia's hands shook as she read the words, and before she could fully process what was happening, the tears started to fall. She clutched the check to her chest, overwhelmed by the generosity and by the realization that her actions had not gone unnoticed. The room was silent, save for the soft sound of Sophia's sniffles. Elon turned to the manager, who had been watching the entire exchange with a mixture of shock and discomfort. "And for this restaurant," Elon said, his voice unwavering, "consider this a reminder. You've built a culture of exclusivity, but perhaps it's time to reconsider how you treat everyone who walks through those doors. Respect should be the foundation of everything, no matter who they are or what they look like." The manager, flustered and speechless, nodded quickly but said nothing. Elon gave him one last look before turning toward the door. As he made his way to the exit, he paused and turned back to Sophia, who was still standing, a mix of disbelief and gratitude on her face. "Never lose that spark of kindness," he said, his voice soft but powerful. "It's rare, it's powerful." With that, Elon Musk stepped out of the copper elm, leaving behind a room full of people reevaluating their actions. The doors closed softly behind him, and the silence lingered long after he had gone. Hash, hash, hash. Chapter 4. The ripple effect. The copper elm was still. For several minutes after Elon Musk left, the clinking of silverware and the soft hum of conversation did not return. The air in the restaurant felt thick with the weight of what had just transpired. Patrons shifted in their seats, some glancing nervously at each other, while others stared blankly into their half-finished meals. The staff, usually so composed, was left fumbling with their tasks, lost in thought. Sophia stood motionless in the center of the room, still clutching the envelope. The note inside had made her hands tremble and her chest swell with emotion, but it was the words written on that small piece of paper that had shaken her most. The world needs more people like you. She could feel the truth in those words as deeply as she felt her own heartbeat. A few moments later, the manager, who had been observing from the sidelines, approached her. His usually sharp demeanor had softened, and his voice was quieter than it had been all evening. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said, his tone less authoritative and more respectful than it had been just hours ago. Sophia didn't respond immediately. She just nodded, her emotions too raw to form coherent words. It wasn't that she was grateful for his praise. It was the acknowledgement of her actions that mattered most. She had done what she believed was right, but now, in the aftermath, it felt like more than just doing her job. It felt like a shift in her very understanding of the world. The other servers began to clear tables, their movements slower than usual. Some of them stole glances at Sophia, offering small nods or tentative smiles. There was a change in the way they looked at her, respect where there had once been indifference, or in some cases dismissal. They had witnessed the same thing she had, an act of kindness rewarded with not just money, but with a deeper understanding of what it means to truly see someone. In a corner of the restaurant, a couple who had been seated near Elon now whispered quietly. The man, his voice low and regretful, spoke to his wife. "We shouldn't have judged him like that," he admitted. His face was flushed with embarrassment. "What if we've done that to other people, to people we didn't even think twice about?" His wife nodded, her face tight with regret. "It's easy to look at someone and make assumptions, but we never know who they really are." Across the room, another table of patrons exchanged uneasy glances. A woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, and her voice cracked as she spoke to her partner. "What if we've treated other people like this? People we didn't even notice, didn't even think to help." The realization spread through the room, like ripples on a calm lake, slowly expanding outward. Everyone who had been present that night carried with them the lesson that had unfolded. No one would forget how their assumptions had been shattered by a single act of kindness. No one would forget how they had all failed to recognize the value in someone until the truth had been laid bare. Sophia quietly resumed her work, her hands steady as she cleared dishes and reset tables. She didn't need their approval or their praise, but it was impossible to ignore ignore the shift in the air. The staff's attitudes had changed, subtle but significant. The way they interacted with one another, the way they looked at her now, it was different. In that brief moment, Sophia had become more than just a server. She had become a reminder of what it meant to be human. As the night wore on and the last of the tables were cleared, the usual buzz of laughter and chatter had all but evaporated. The staff, once a collection of individuals focused on their own tasks, now stood together as a quiet, reflective group. The manager addressed them at the end of the night, his tone uncharacteristically measured. "Tonight was unusual," he began, his voice softer than usual. "But I think we all have something to think about after what happened. Let's make sure this place represents what we say we stand for. Respect, kindness, empathy, those should be the foundations of everything we do here, not just for the people who fit a certain mold, but for everyone who walks through our doors." The words hung in the air, and the staff exchanged glances, some of them nodding in agreement. It was clear that the night had made an impact, not just on the patrons, but on the very people who worked at the Copper Elm. As Sophia left the restaurant that night, the envelope tucked carefully into her bag, she couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. The money was life-changing, yes. It would allow her to pursue her dream of culinary school, a dream that had once seemed out of reach, but it was the lesson she had learned, the one she had witnessed in real time, that would stay with her forever. The power of kindness, the depth of empathy, it wasn't just a fleeting feeling, it was something she could carry with her every day, into every kitchen, into every interaction, and into every corner of her life. Outside, the city of Santa Fe buzzed with its usual energy. The sounds of traffic, the chatter of people on the streets, it all seemed the same. But to Sophia, everything felt sharper, more vivid. She felt awake in a way she hadn't before. Every encounter, every exchange now felt more meaningful. The world, for all its chaos and judgment, also held beauty in its kindness. She would hold on to that beauty no matter what came next. News of Elon Musk's undercover experiment spread quickly, sparking conversations across social media and news outlets. The Copper Elm became the center of attention, though much of it was critical. The public now knew the truth about what had happened that night. Stories of the staff's initial reactions, the judgment, the whispers, the dismissive attitudes were shared and debated in comment sections, sparking discussions about empathy, kindness, and how people perceive others based on appearance. Sophia, suddenly thrust into the limelight, was hesitant at first. She had never sought attention, but now, reporters from all over were eager to hear her side of the story. She found herself sitting for interviews, fielding questions about that night. When asked about her experience, Sophia spoke plainly, her words simple but powerful. It wasn't about knowing who he was, she said in one interview. It was about treating someone with dignity no matter their circumstances. That's something we should all do, not just for billionaires in disguise, but for everyone. Her words resonated with people, striking a chord far beyond the walls of the Copper Elm. The check Elon had left for her, a generous $50,000, allowed Sophia to enroll in culinary school, the first step toward realizing her dream of becoming a chef. It also gave her a platform to advocate for kindness and inclusivity in the service industry, a message she had lived firsthand. For Elon, the experiment had left its mark too. He reflected on it in an interview months later, speaking briefly but thoughtfully about the lessons it had taught him. "It reminded me that the smallest actions can reveal the biggest truths," he said. "Kindness isn't about grand gestures, it's about the everyday choices we make." As for the Copper Elm, the management took action. New training programs were implemented, focused on fostering empathy and respect for all guests, regardless of their appearance or social status. The staff, particularly those who had been dismissive that night, found themselves reevaluating their biases and behavior. For everyone who had been present that evening, the lessons stayed with them. The event had become more than a viral story. It was a profound reminder of how our perceptions of others could shape our actions, and how a single act of kindness could leave a ripple effect that changed lives. And as the world moved on, Sophia and those who had witnessed that night never forgot the lesson they had learned. It wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about humanity. It was about treating people with dignity, even when society might choose to overlook them. In a world obsessed with success, Elon's experiment had proven that true character shines brightest when it's least expected.